In the quiet, ancient town of Takamatsu, nestled in the Kagawa prefecture of Japan, there lies a small, forgotten temple known as Kanenji. The temple, with its moss-covered stones and overgrown pathways, has been a site of local legends for generations. Its most chilling tale is that of the Yurei, a restless spirit that is said to haunt the area, seeking vengeance for a wrong done long ago. It was a crisp autumn evening when my friends and I decided to explore Kanenji. We had heard whispers of the Yurei from the locals, tales of a ghostly figure seen drifting through the fog, her mournful wails echoing through the ancient trees. With our curiosity piqued and Halloween around the corner, we figured it was the perfect time to delve into this eerie legend. The drive to Takamatsu was peaceful, the countryside bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. As we arrived in town, we could see the temple's silhouette against the horizon, its traditional pagoda standing tall amidst a canopy of trees. The air was crisp and cool, carrying with it the scent of autumn leaves and a hint of something far less inviting. We parked our car in a small, gravel lot near the temple entrance. The path leading to Kanenji was flanked by old lanterns, their light flickering faintly as dusk settled in. We approached the temple, the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant hoot of an owl our only companions. The temple's main hall, with its weathered wooden pillars and cracked tile roof, looked like something out of a storybook. We stepped inside, where the air was musty and heavy with the scent of incense. Dust motes danced in the weak light filtering through the cracked windows. The interior was a maze of darkened rooms and ancient relics, each telling a story of a bygone era. Our plan was to spend the night in the temple, hoping to experience a brush with the supernatural. We set up our gear, flashlights, a digital recorder, and some snacks inside one of the larger rooms. As we settled in, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The silence was thick and oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind outside. After a few hours of exploring and recording, we decided to take a break. That's when we started to hear it, a soft, mournful wail coming from the direction of the temple's garden. The sound was almost like a gentle breeze, but with an undercurrent of sorrow that sent shivers down my spine. We decided to investigate. The garden was overgrown, the once pristine stone paths now obscured by wild grass and creeping vines. As we made our way through the foliage, the wailing grew louder, more insistent. It was as though the sound was guiding us towards something or someone. We reached a small, overgrown cemetery at the back of the garden. The tombstones were old and weathered, barely legible. Among them stood a single, larger stone slab, partially covered in moss. The wailing seemed to be coming from this spot, and as we approached, we noticed a faint, shimmering figure hovering above the slab. The figure was that of a woman, her traditional kimono tattered and stained. Her hair hung loose, flowing around her like a dark cloud. Her face was a mask of sorrow and anger, her eyes hollow and haunted. We stood frozen, our breaths catching in our throats as the ghostly figure floated closer. "Is this the Yurei?" whispered Akira, one of my friends, his voice trembling. I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the apparition. According to local lore, the Yurei was a spirit of a woman who had been wronged in life, betrayed by someone she trusted. Her restless spirit was doomed to wander, seeking retribution for her suffering. The Yurei let out a mournful cry, and the temperature around us dropped dramatically. The cold was biting, seeping through our clothing and numbing our limbs. I could see my breath misting in the air, and the ground beneath us seemed to grow colder with each passing moment. As the spirit drifted closer, we could make out fragments of her story, whispered in a voice that seemed to echo from another world. She spoke of betrayal and loss, of a promise broken by someone she loved. Her voice was a haunting melody of grief and anger, a lament for the life that had been stolen from her. We listened in stunned silence, the weight of her sorrow pressing down on us. The Uriai's wails grew louder, and her form began to waver, as if she were struggling against some unseen force. It was clear that she was trapped between worlds, her spirit unable to find peace. Feeling a deep sense of empathy, we decided to try and help. We remembered the traditional ways of appeasing restless spirits, and with trembling hands, we set up a small altar using the offerings we had brought. We placed incense, fruit, and a bowl of water on the ground, hoping to provide some comfort to the tormented spirit. As we lit the incense and placed the offerings, the Uriai's wailing began to subside. Her figure seemed to become less transparent, and the oppressive cold in the air lifted slightly. It was as though our efforts had given her some measure of solace. The spirit's gaze softened, and she slowly began to drift away, her form fading into the mist that had begun to settle over the garden. The air grew warmer, and the oppressive weight of her presence lifted. We watched in silence as she disappeared, leaving behind a sense of calm that was almost palpable. When we returned to the temple, we were exhausted but relieved. The experience had been both terrifying and deeply moving, and it had given us a new perspective on the legends of the Uriai. We spent the rest of the night in quiet reflection, the silence of the temple now peaceful rather than foreboding. As dawn broke and we prepared to leave, we couldn't help but feel that we had made a difference. The Uriai's story was one of sorrow and betrayal, but we hoped that, in some small way, we had helped her find a measure of peace. The Kanenji Temple, with its ancient stones and timeless legends, would forever be a reminder of the delicate balance between the living and the dead, and the powerful emotions that can bind spirits to the world of the living. We left Takamatsu with a newfound respect for the legends and the unseen forces that linger in the shadows. The tale of the Uriai was no longer just a story, it was a vivid, haunting reminder of the spirits that walk among us, seeking solace and understanding in a world that often overlooks their pain. In the rural outskirts of Shizuoka, Japan, nestled between the mist-covered hills and dense forests, lies a small village called Okutama. Known for its serene landscapes and traditional charm, Okutama is a place where ancient legends linger like the morning fog. Among these legends, one stands out for its sheer terror, the tale of the Tik-Tik, a vengeful spirit who roams the night in search of her next victim. It was a crisp autumn evening when my friends and I arrived in Okutama, drawn by the stories of the Tik-Tik that had circulated through the region. The village was quiet, its narrow streets lined with traditional wooden houses and the occasional, solitary lantern. The air was cool, and the leaves crunched beneath our feet as we made our way through the village, our breaths visible in the chill. We had decided to stay at an old ryokan on the edge of town, its rustic charm providing an authentic experience of rural Japan. The ryokan, with its tatami mats and sliding shoji doors, was both cozy and a little eerie. Our host, an elderly man with a weathered face, greeted us with a solemn nod. "Be careful out there," he advised, his voice low and gravelly. "The Tik-Tik is known to wander these woods. It's best not to be out after dark."
We assured him we would be cautious and set out to explore the village. As night fell, the fog rolled in, blanketing the village in an otherworldly haze. We made our way to the edge of the forest, where the trees loomed tall and dark against the moonlit sky. The dense foliage and shadows made the forest seem alive with hidden secrets, and a sense of unease began to settle over us. The legend of the Tek-Tek, as we had learned, was both chilling and tragic. According to the tale, the Tek-Tek was a young woman who had fallen onto the tracks of a train and was subsequently severed in half by the oncoming train. Now, as a vengeful spirit, she drags her severed torso around, making a distinctive tek-tek sound as she moves. Her goal is to capture and kill anyone she encounters, seeking revenge for her untimely and gruesome death. We ventured into the forest, the crunch of leaves underfoot, and the distant hoots of owls our only companions. The fog was thick, reducing visibility to a few feet ahead. As we walked deeper into the forest, the eerie atmosphere was amplified by the occasional snap of twigs and rustle of unseen creatures. Our plan was to document any strange occurrences, and we set up our camera equipment in a small clearing surrounded by ancient, gnarled trees. We began recording, our voices low and cautious as we talked about the legend and our hopes of encountering something supernatural. As the hours passed, the fog grew denser, and the forest seemed to close in around us. The temperature dropped, and a cold breeze whispered through the trees. We were starting to feel the weight of the forest darkness when we heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping sound, like someone dragging a heavy object along the ground.
We froze, our eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The sound grew louder, more distinct, and it became clear that it was coming from behind us. We turned to see a figure emerging from the fog, moving slowly and deliberately. It was a woman, or at least what looked like a woman, but her movements were unnatural, her body contorted and dragging along the ground. The Tek-Tek was exactly as described in the legends. Her upper body was intact, but her lower half was missing, leaving a gaping, bloody wound where her torso had been severed. She was dressed in what appeared to be a tattered kimono, and her face was twisted into a mask of rage and agony. The sound of her dragging body was unmistakable, a rhythmic, scraping noise that sent chills down our spines. We stood frozen, unable to move as the Tek-Tek approached. Her eyes were dark and hollow, and she seemed to be focused solely on us. The terror was palpable, and we could feel the cold, malevolent energy radiating from her. In a panic, we tried to gather our equipment and make our escape, but the Tek-Tek moved faster than we anticipated. Her dragging sound grew louder, more insistent, and she seemed to close the distance between us with alarming speed. We scrambled through the underbrush, the fog and darkness, making it difficult to see where we were going. The forest was a maze of shadows and twisting paths, and we could hear the Tek-Tek's dragging sound echoing all around us. The fear was overwhelming, and the sense of being hunted was intense. We could feel her presence closing in, her vengeful spirit determined to claim us as her next victims. Just when it seemed like there was no escape, we stumbled upon a small, abandoned shrine nestled between the trees. Desperate and terrified, we darted inside, hoping that the sacred space might offer some protection. The shrine was ancient, its wooden structure worn and weathered, but it seemed to provide a momentary respite from the terror outside. Inside the shrine, we huddled together, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The sound of the Tek-Tek's dragging body was still audible, but it seemed to be moving away, as if she could not enter the sacred space. We waited in silence, our hearts pounding, until the sound finally faded into the distance. As dawn approached, the fog began to lift, and the forest slowly returned to its peaceful state. We cautiously made our way back to the Ryokan, our experience leaving us deeply shaken. The encounter with the Tek-Tek had been both terrifying and enlightening, a stark reminder of the dark legends that still linger in the corners of our world. The legend of the Tek-Tek remains a haunting reminder of the restless spirits that roam the night. In Okutama, the tale of the vengeful woman who drags her severed body through the forest serves as a chilling testament to the power of folklore and the eerie beauty of the supernatural. Our night in the forest will forever be etched in our memories, a vivid and terrifying experience that brought the ancient legends of Japan to life.